Okay, this is a short history of surfing. I like talking about the old history of surfing a lot on the courses. There's reasons why, but there's a whole lot to surfing. Even the modern history is super exciting. The history of the last 15 years is incredible. The kind of post-Kelly. Kelly's been there for so long now. There's a whole history, a modern history, but this is kind of a history really up until the early 60s. And when I've got my courses, I always ask people a question. I've got them sitting down for a group, we're having lunch, and I'll say, how long do you think people have been surfing? And the answers are very consistent. They're normally within 100 years. Normally you'll say 50 years, 60 years, 100. You're going to have some bright spark or go, oh, it's a few hundred. And then somebody else goes, oh, it's really old. It's really old. In fact, we don't know how long people have been surfing. That's it, we don't know. If you could body surf, which I consider entirely surfing, if you could body surf, you throw yourself with a wave, and you develop that culture in a village, in an ancient village somewhere, and they get a culture of body surfing. This has happened all over the world. There are amazing parts of the world where people have a culture of being able to body surf. Normally it depends on some form of swimming ability, and there's many ancient peoples don't swim, but a lot of places where they do, and they develop a culture of body surfing. Now we're human beings, we use tools. Okay, here's a piece of wood. Ooh, I'll come in on this piece of wood. Yeah, that supports my body. A thin piece of wood will plane once it's got the force of the wave behind us, and whoa, I'm planing on this piece of wood. Look at the hullers of Barbados, and you see them standing on nothing. A piece of wood, they call them hullers, gliding across waves. Okay, we stand. We're human beings, we walk erect, so why not find a piece of wood we can stand on? And we develop, and we develop, and we develop. And we don't really know, at the moment, how long somebody's been surfing. But we've got, from carvings in Peru, a track back to 5,000 years. 5,000 years somebody's been standing on a surfboard riding it. It was really funny. They had the World Amateurs in Peru not long ago, and they did that kind of surfing's coming home thing. Yeah, damn right. You know, it's incredible. They built surfboards out of like a grass, like a papyrus grass. They call them the little horses, and they'd ride them standing up like an SUP, like a canoe type thing, standing like a surfboard and like a bodyboard as well. Goa in India. You see them kind of using a SUP type thing. The fishermen would move through lakes and lagoons. West Africa. West Africa, we know verbally, had surfing. People surfed using a type of board. Died out, and we don't know quite why it died out, but it's likely because that part of West Africa was used by the slavers, and ships coming in, and probably wasn't a good place to be hanging with you and your mates having a surf when there's a slave ship coming in, if you know what I mean. So we don't really know. But why we are doing this sport now, why modern surfing exists, comes from a people called the Polynesians. They are the fathers and mothers of this sport, this modern sport of surfing. And when I say like mothers, you've got to get this in your head. This is not a male sport. It was always in the Polynesian tradition, female and male. Now, if you look, say the first Westerners that ever come to the Hawaiian Islands, who were the two best surfers? It was two sisters. So when you get this image of an ancient Hawaiian surfer, don't think man. You could think woman and man. Women had an incredible part in the ocean. You know, when you think their journeys of discovery, they went what we call the Polynesian Triangle. At the bottom you have New Zealand, let's say it's here. On the other side you've got the Easter Islands, and at the apex you've got the Hawaiian Islands. And the Hawaiian Islands are the islands singly furthest away from any continental landmass. And they discovered them. There was a lovely documentary from NASA the other year, and there was a lady, one of the heads of NASA during the Apollo expeditions, and they asked her, they said, do you think this was the greatest step into the unknown that mankind's ever taken? And she came back like that. She said, no, I think that the journeys of the Polynesians through the Pacific were. Incredible. They navigated by moon and stars, but they knew about swell patterns. They knew about ocean currents. They knew what was being carried in the waters. They were phenomenal navigators, but women sometimes led those journeys as men did. The last royal head of the Hawaiian people was a queen, not a king. So think about this, women and men surfing. And they made an incredible journey throughout the Polynesian islands, and they took surfing with them. We know Samoans only rode lying down. The Maori, which were one of the last places to be colonized, they had like a thin, really kind of difficult little bodyboard they rode. Tahitians stood and rode lying down. It's the Tahitians, we believe, they're the ones who go into the Hawaiian Islands and populate it around 1,200 plus years ago, and they fell in love with surfing. They felt that by swimming, by sailing, by fishing, they would please their gods of the sea. But surfing, this beautiful thing that did nothing but look so graceful and beautiful, was one of the highest ways to grace their gods of the sea. And they split surfing around social lines. The royal family members, the kings and queens and stuff, I mean, it was funny because as they got older, they tried to put on weight to show importance. And they'd eat breadfruit. And I mean, these people, Polynesian folks, can put on a bit of weight. And they were riding huge surfboards. A board called the Olu. Anything from 16 foot plus in length. Can you imagine them gliding this 16 foot long surfboard? And they were given the easy waves, the rolling waves were theirs, you know, like kings and queens. That's what the names in Waikiki are. It's after those ancient days. Easy, rolling, long waves, they come on in, you know. So the common people had a completely different type of surfboard. Now, the common people were given the bad waves, which were actually the good waves. The ones that we see kind of now, the ones we want to ride, hollow, hard-breaking. And we had and developed a completely different style of surfboard called the Alea. Alea was kind of very like a surfboard, very, you know, surfboardy shape. All of these boards did not have a fin. We thought for a long time, because they didn't have a fin and they were kind of basic looking, that they must have been quite primitive to ride, just going straight to the beach. Now, a fantastic guy called Wagner, he's from California, moved to Australia, surfboard shaper, and he started delving back into the old designs, and he rebuilt the Olu and he rebuilt the Alea, and you should see the surfing done on him. He put some of the best surfers. See a film called Surfica Musica, which is where they've taken these guys and they're riding these ancient surfboards, 360s, little barrels, turns. So we now know in redesigning those boards that these Hawaiians were extremely sophisticated surfers. They even had a bodyboard called the Papio board, but they didn't have a fin, so they'd be sliding, gliding, and going particularly fast. We thought for a long time that they rode only small waves. And we always heard them surfing this place called Paumalu. Where's Paumalu? Paumalu comes up silently. It's a wonderful thing. And it was Sunset Beach. Sunset Beach on the north shore of Hawaii is one of the most powerful, most dangerous waves in the world. When they have the Triple Crown events, they have one at sunset, and all the pros going, okay, sunset's going to sort everybody out. They were out there 1,000 years ago, flying across these waves. So an incredibly sophisticated surfing culture. Now, they had competitions. Within competitions are new. If you asked anybody how long have competitions been going on, they'd say a couple of years. But they were competing and gambling on the results. One queen would say to the other king, listen, I've got these 6 war canoes, you've got 100 pigs, let's bet the war canoes against the pigs. Who's the better surfing family? And they were based on style, speed, the size of the wave, particularly the style and grace. How do, you know, it's something, you know, we've tried to keep with our schools and stuff, that graceful surfing, you know, is the best surfing. So this wonderful culture, very deep culture of surfing, it all ended really in the arrival of 1778 of Captain James Cook. Now, I'm old enough and British enough to be told, I was told by Captain Cook was this wonderful discoverer of things. Well, how did you discover Australia when there was an Aboriginal already there? You know, Hawaii discovered. Half the time he was chasing a Dutchman called Abel Tasman around the place, but okay, he made some amazing trips. Yes, he did make some amazing trips. But you know, the first thing he did in Australia was shoot at 3 Aboriginals for no reason at all. You know, let's show who's in charge. Did the same thing sailing towards Big Island in the Hawaiian chain. As he was coming into this bay, he was firing cannon and rifle. But the Hawaiians actually thought he was a god. They had these stories, you know, really strong stories that once great ships would come, and on it would be huge sails and men with black and gold, and they'd have the power to take life instantly. Well, here was cannon, rifle, officers, black, gold, ships, big sails. To God. They soon found out that Cook and his sailors were not gods. And in fact, he ended his life there. On his third visit, on an argument over a boat, they did not eat him. That was for many years, they said, oh, the Hawaiians ate Cook. No, they didn't eat him. They'd given up cannibalism many years before. So the colonization began then, and it destroyed Hawaiian life. The rats on those ships are still attacking Hawaiian wildlife. There's one statistic of 10,000 people dying in a 40-year period from the common cold. Sexually transmitted diseases, the introduction of alcohol. I mean, this really hammered into their society. Their population level just plummeted. And what killed surfing off was the arrival of missionaries, and they were called Calvinists. Now, I spent a good time looking at who these Calvinists were, John Calvin. And when you look at Calvinism, it looks at anybody singing, laughing, dancing, having fun. That's the devil. So they looked at these flipping naked Hawaiian men and women charging across waves, having loads of fun, and went, oh, this is so evil. We've got to stop it. And the Hawaiians, they took up Christianity very quickly, and they shamed them into stopping surfing. The women called wahine. Wahine is a lovely name. There's a surfing magazine, I don't know if it's still in publication in America, called Wahine. Wahine is an honorary name. It's a female surfer. Any surfing girl watching this, you go to a shop in Hawaii, ask for a board. This wahine would like a board, And the wahine were the teachers of the children very often. And they'd be taking the kids down. When Dad was doing something, they'd show the kids how to surf. The wahine was shamed. You must cover yourself up, wear a long dress, do not go in the water, do not teach your children to surf. The men, well, they go fishing, they go sailing. If it was a good day to surf, go surf. Now you go to the plantation. And on the end of every night, we give you a rum ration. And on a Sunday, you go to church. Boom. 6 days a week, boom. No more surfing. And they took up this idea very much to heart, and they gave up surfing. We figure by the end of the 1880s, 100 years or so since the arrival of Cook, that there was about 150 surfers left throughout the islands regularly surfing. There's probably 150 surfers on my local beach every day. We nearly lost, like the West African surfing, we nearly lost that surfing tradition. And three things bring it back to life. Now, in the late 1800s, a group of brothers, two brothers, were sent to a military college in Northern California. And they took their surfboards with them. And the head of the college said, what the heck are those pieces of wood you got? They went, well, they're surfboards, we ride waves. Oh, we've got waves. Come and show you what you do. Can you imagine how cold these young men, if anybody's been to Northern California, it's flipping cold, And they were shown riding in on these waves. It must have been freezing. But it was a big story. Men walking on water kind of thing. George Freeth. Oh, by the way, those brothers also went to England and went surfing in a place in Yorkshire called Bridlington. And that was only found out, this is 2015, last year, I think it was 2013, in an attic. They found that these young Hawaiians had been to the UK, to a private school, and had surfed in Yorkshire. So there's a guy called George Freeth. George Freeth is the first one of me. He's the first commercial surf teacher we know of. Now, he was part Irish, part Hawaiian, a phenomenally gifted waterman, great surfer, and he had a friend called Hume Ford. Hume Ford was an American, and he had an idea. Hume Ford said, hey, listen, tourism's going to come. The rich and the wealthy can get on steamships. Sail was ending, steamships are going to come, and they'll come on holiday. And they built hotels in an area called Waikiki. The first hotel that was built in Waikiki was called the Surfrider Hotel. And George Freeth was there, employed, teaching people to surf. It's amazing who went surfing there. King Edward, the one that abdicated. Agatha Christie, the writer, went a couple of times. And the really important person that went there was a writer called Jack London. Now, you might have heard of Jack London, White Fang, Call of the Wild. I mean, some of his books were made into kind of Disney movies and stuff. Amazing travel writer. And he fell in love with surfing, and Freeth became a friend of his. He and his wife, they loved surfing. They went to the Hawaiian Islands a number of times. It's really funny. Another famous writer was Mark Twain. And Mark Twain was useless at it. If you read Mark Twain's book of short stories, it's about learning to surf. And he actually said, none but a native will ever master this. He didn't get on with surfing. But the surfing stories that were written by Jack London are wonderful. The Royal Sport of Kings, he called it. And these stories were published in the American Women's Journal. In fact, it was women reading a magazine in America were the first to really hear about surfing. Now, Freeth took a journey to California. I thought that he was asked to go there. I found out later he chose to go there. And he was pretty famous. He would do surfing displays. He was asked by the Pacific Coast Railway owners to do displays. Every time they opened a new stretch of track, they'd try to publicize it. Here's the Pacific Coast Railway. Very scenic. It's a lovely route going down the Californian coast. Come and watch the man that walks on water. And he would be free flying across these waves, you know. First guy surf Oceanside, Huntington Beach, on and on and on. But at Oceanside, he executed an incredible rescue. He became a lifeguard, and he was used his surfboard to rescue people. And at Oceanside, a Japanese fishing boat got in trouble, and there were enormous waves breaking. They said the waves were hitting the bottom of the pier. Well, I've been to Oceanside. That's a huge pier. And he got every one of them in without loss of life. 6 people through huge waves. He was given the American Congressional Medal of Honor. And he was a real hero, you know, a real American national hero. They said he died young because he was so stressed out. In fact, he died with the flu epidemic after the First World War. But Freeth had a young friend, and this young friend was in Hawaii, and his name was Duke Kahanamoko. And if there's anybody who really pushed and gave us modern surfing, it's the Duke. Now, the Duke, by 15 years of age, was the world's greatest freestyle swimmer. You see, he realized that in freestyle, if the lower legs moved like that, you see, before they were kind of undulating a little bit, like you see in butterfly. He realized if those hips stayed still, the legs kicked from the hip, you go faster. And he broke the world freestyle record 3 times in one morning in Honolulu. So in 1912, they asked him to go to Stockholm to the first real Olympic Games. Now, they're called the Sunshine Olympics. Have a look at them. They're very interesting. It's the first modern Olympics, as it were. And he was blitzing all the swimming events. He was a tall, handsome-looking Hawaiian guy, you know, royal family one, and he was just the star of the Games. But it came to the final sprint, the final swimming sprint, and he wasn't around. And the organizer said, oh, we can't wait for the Duke, you know, can't wait for him, we're going to have the race. Now, the second fastest guy in the world was an Australian. And he said, and all the other swimmers said, hey, we're not racing. You know, we can't race. We haven't got the Duke, and Duke's the greatest. We want to race against the greatest. So they went and found him. Somebody told him the wrong time. They found the Duke. He turned up. He blitzed it. But he said after the race, listen, that was so lovely what you all did, waiting for me. How can I ever thank you, and especially to this Australian? How can I ever thank you? He said, very simple. Come to Australia, show us this swimming technique, and show us this surfing you keep going on about. Because that's what the Duke would say. He said, yeah, I like swimming, I'm a good swimmer, but really I'm a surfer. You know, what's surfing? And that's exactly what he did. In 1914, he goes to Australia, and it's like a superstar going there. This guy was so famous, when he came to Britain, the King of England said, can I meet him? Not, oh, you've got to meet this guy. The King said, is he here? I want to meet him. He was like David Beckham or whatever. So he goes to Freshwater Beach, and day after day, he does a surfing display, showing people how you can ride on waves. He built a board to do it. He didn't have a board with him. He made a board out of wood to do it. And being a typical Hawaiian, he chose a little girl called Isabel Latham. Now, there's still film of Isabel talking about these days. This film of the Duke riding in. Last year, I believe, they celebrated this wonderful moment, 2014, where the Duke did these displays at Freshwater. Thousands of people would go and watch him. And he'd glide in on this board. Isabel would ride in. He was such a fit man, he could pick Isabel up on the same surfboard, put her on his shoulders, and ride in with Isabel. Now, he gave the Australians an incredible gift. He knew what Freeth had done. He knew that the surfboard was a great rescue vehicle. And he said, listen, Australia, you got waves, surf them, but if there's somebody in trouble, Don't go and swim for them. It's slow and it's kind of dangerous. You could use a boat, but it's difficult. The fastest way to get somebody is with a surfboard. And he became the father of what we call surf life saving. We have to say the Australians and the Americans, the Australians from Kahanamoko, the Americans from Freeth really pushed the idea of controlling and being able to look after people in the surf life, what we call beach surf lifeguards. Now, the Duke's boards were incredibly heavy by then. I was really lucky to meet the curator of the Museum of Californian Surfing, Jane Smausch. Now, Jane was in her 60s. She'd never been surfing, and I was blessed because I said, I'm going to take you surfing. She said, you can't do that. And I did. I took the curator of the Museum of Californian surfing. And she said, listen, you can do anything. I said, can I pick up the Duke's board? And it's all locked away and everything. And one of his boards was there. And she said, sure. And I tried to pick it up. It's like 110 pounds of solid redwood. You'd have to be built like an Olympic swimmer to pick it up. I mean, women weren't hardly surfing anymore. Surfing was really for big, strong men, and very few of them. Now, this all changed with a guy called Tom Blake. Now, Tom Blake was on the American swimming team. He was a young man, friends of the Duke, and the Duke said to Blake, hey, Blake, come to Hawaii. I'll teach you to surf. He said, I've surfed in California. No, come to Hawaii. You've got to surf there. And he did. And he went, I'm never going home. This is the best place. I'm going to stay. I'm going to be a lifeguard. And that's what he did. And he was very smart. I've got a picture of him in my lecture room, in this room here, just up on the top corner of Blake. And he was so smart. He said, okay, well, all our boards are really heavy, but I know that the Hawaiian boards, the ancient boards, were made of willy wood. They were quite light. I'm going to build the same shape surfboards, but I'm going to make it hollow. And that's what he did. He was a very clever man. And he chambered this surfboard, took it out, and he couldn't control it. And he went, well, hang on, dolphin's got a fin, shark's got a fin, fish got fins. I'm going to put a fin thing in the bottom of this board, and boom. Suddenly he was able to ride across. His invention wasn't taken on for quite a long time, and that's another story, but the fin and riding across waves with control was born. He's an amazing man, Blake. He's one of my biggest heroes. He paddled out one day on one of his long, hollow boards with an umbrella. And he stood up, and he put the umbrella up, and he started moving. He went, great, I'll put a sail on it, windsurfing. He invented windsurfing. The leash. He invented it, and then he said, I don't like it, it's too dangerous. You should all be good swimmers. So think about what he said. The first picture of any water sport taken from the water in a water housing was by Blake. He invented a water housing. Shorts. There's a long story, but I like Blake's story about how they got shorts. His legs used to rub him on the little kind of swimming shorts they had sitting on the board. So he went to a tailor in Hawaii, in Honolulu, and said, hey, see those curtains you got there? Can you make me a long pair of shorts with those kind of flower curtains? And the tailor made them. He wore them down the beach, and everyone went, they're really funny, but they're quite cool. We'll have a pair of those. And that's your long kind of floral shorts. There's a part of Blake in every surfer. You know, we owe so much to that man. And it goes on. He invented that thing you see on Baywatch where they run down the beach, the Peterson tube. That's his idea. He gave the idea to a guy called Pete Peterson. Off we went. Just an amazing man. Wraparound sunglasses. It's just incredible. He died in his 90s. Okay, so it's obvious because of Blake, boards should be light. And the big changes came actually with the materials that were used in the Second World War in California, in the building of the Super Fortress and the Strata Fortress bomber. Horrible, great big things. You had to carry bombs a long way. And in it, they were using balsa wood for the struts and stuff, and the interior, and fiberglass, this new material. And there was an amazing surfer, Simmons. And Simmons, really, we're only still really discovering the genius of this guy Simmons. Really odd man, but incredible genius. But he looked at these materials and said, okay, if I take the fiberglass, stick the pieces of wood together, shape a surfboard out of it, put the fiberglass round it, make it waterproof, put one of sort of Blake fins in the bottom, I'll have a light waterproof surfboard. And that's what he did. He'd been injured when he was a child. He had a bad arm, so it really helped him to have a light surfboard that he could control. But he was a really gifted surfer. And he just changed the way we thought. There's an amazing book, I'm still kind of reading it and researching it, which he had, and it was called The Architecture of Planing Hulls. And it was all about aspect ratio, concave V, how things worked in the hulls of ships. And he transformed that into what we could do with surfboards, concaves, Vs. He invented a double fin surfboard. He knew that the wider back surfboard would turn easier. Rockers different, rails. I mean, an amazing man, amazing man. He died surfing down a point, all on his own. All that was ever found was a board, and eccentric guy. Lived in a car, ate fish and fruit, and that was about it. Just amazing guy, but really a genius. And he gave us modern surfboard construction. You'll hear all the old surfboard guys going back to the days with Simmons, and Greg Knoll was underneath him, Lance Carson knew of him, and just an incredible guy. So surfing was growing because now there were light surfboards. Women were surfing more. There were little enclaves. This isn't thousands of people surfing. This is hundreds along the Californian coast, but Rincon, particularly Malibu. And Malibu, there was a really keen group of surfers, and they were kind of mixing too with the kind of Hollywood people as well, but there were some amazing girls surfing by that time. When you look at Marilyn Monroe, and she was Norma Jean then, she was a really keen surfer. There's pictures of her. She was going out with a guy called Tommy Zahn, and Tommy Zahn became one of the greatest surfers on that coast, and him and Joey Quigg invented the kind of pintail surfboard. So Marilyn was riding the latest of equipment, and she would do tandem with a guy called Lance Carson, amazing surfer. So women were surfing, and at Malibu was a little girl called Kathy Connor. She was 15 years of age, and she went home and she said to her dad, "Hey Dad, you want to see what I'm doing at Malibu? We're kind of surfing, and we've got this kind of youth lifestyle, and we play ukuleles and stuff." And okay. Now he was a Hollywood screenwriter, and he saw this kind of stuff going on. His daughter, she was really small. She was a girl, so girl midget. She ended up being called Gidget. That was Kathy's nickname. And he wrote a book about her called Gidget. It's kind of a weird book. It's her youth rites of passage into being a young woman. And they made a movie about it. They made a movie of the book. And it was like the Star Wars of its day. It was super popular. People flocked from all over America to watch Gidget. It's a really bad movie, actually, but super influential. You couldn't sell enough surfboards. They were literally running out of materials for surfboards. And that brings us kind of up to the modern day. That's 57 and into the 60s. Europe, we didn't have an economic boom after the Second World War as America did. We were devastated. And we didn't really get money in our pocket to spend on things like surfboards till the 1960s. And in the 1960s, we started to have time and money to go to the beaches of France and go to the beaches of the UK, West Country, and people were drowning. They were drowning in the surf line. And actually, strangely, a friend of my dad's called Commander Chick Thompson from Lantwit Major in South Wales, he said, "I know what we do. Let's get the Australians from Wollongong, Newcastle and Sydney. Let's get those lifeguards, because they know what they're doing," from the old Hanamoko days. "Let's bring them over. When it's our summer, it's their winter. They can work for us. But when it's our winter, they can go home and work their summers." And that's what they happened. In 1967, I've been surfing on pieces of wood since about 63. And in 63, the first surfers kind of came, stand up, but I was too little to have one of those surfboards. But by 67, I was big enough to be able to jump on to a proper surfboard. And I was taught by one of these great surfers, the best Aussie surfer at that time in a place called Newquay in England, taught me. I was a Welshman on holiday. Have a look at the history of surfing. I've seen some amazing changes, in 50 plus years of surfing. What we're doing now on waves is just unbelievable. This towing into giant waves, we never thought this would ever happen. But some amazing changes like wetsuits. We never thought you'd be surfing the places you surf now with the wetsuits you've got. Women surfing is the biggest change. All right, the leash is a big thing. I think take that damn thing off and go surf without it sometime. But women surfing, look at the Pro Tour. This is 2015, 14 and 15. It's amazing what's happened in women surfing. It's going through the roof. The maneuvers, the technique, it's fantastic. So have a look at the history of surfing. There's a modern history of surfing, which we're going to do as a talk one day. But have a look at the ancient stuff too. It's really exciting. Some great websites like legendarysurfers.com. Look at that. Super great website to find out about these amazing characters that made this amazing sport. And the next time you go surfing, think, hang on, this makes golf 20 seconds old. Football's about 5 minutes. This is one of the oldest sports on this planet, and you're taking part of it. Thanks.